The conference room felt like a courtroom. Jared stood at the head of the table, his voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. Avery botched the critical shipment data again, he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. These mistakes are costing us thousands. My coffee cup trembled slightly in my hands. I set it down and cleared my throat. Actually, Jared, I used the numbers you gave me yesterday. The error was in your original spreadsheet. The room went dead silent. Jared's face turned red, but his smirk never wavered. If you're going to be this defensive every time we discuss your performance, maybe this role isn't for you anymore. Within an hour, I was sitting across from HR. We're letting you go, effective immediately, the manager said, sliding termination papers across the desk. Performance issues. As I packed my desk, coworkers avoided eye contact. Some whispered behind their hands. Jared watched from his office doorway, arms crossed, looking satisfied. But as I carried my box to the elevator, something strange happened. I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a sad one. A knowing smile. Because I'd been ready for this day for months. Let me tell you who I really am. My name is Avery Larson, and for 3 years I was the backbone of Innovis Logistics. I kept their chaotic shipping system running like clockwork. I worked late nights, weekends, holidays. I loved solving problems that made everyone else's head spin. I was the quiet one in meetings, the reliable one who never complained. When systems crashed, they called me. When clients panicked, they sent me. When impossible deadlines loomed, I made them possible. Jared took credit for all of it. He was my manager, the golden boy with perfect teeth and expensive suits. He'd present my solutions to upper management like they were his brilliant ideas. He'd tell clients how his innovative approach saved their accounts. Meanwhile, I sat in my small cubicle, invisible. For the longest time, I didn't mind. I thought hard work spoke for itself. I believed if I just kept proving my worth, recognition would come naturally. I was wrong. The first time I realized Jared would never let me move up, that was the day everything changed in my mind. 2 years ago, I spent weeks training Megan, a bright new hire fresh out of college. She was eager, friendly, and genuinely grateful for my help. I walked her through our complex inventory system, showed her shortcuts I'd developed, and even let her shadow me during client calls. 3 months later, Jared promoted her to senior analyst. The position I'd been hoping for. The position I'd earned. The worst part? He used my own presentation. The one I'd spent nights perfecting, full of efficiency improvements I'd designed. Megan delivered it word for word to the management team. Later, Megan found me by the coffee machine. Her cheeks were red with embarrassment. Avery, I'm so sorry. I tried to tell them it was your work, but Jared said you didn't have the leadership skills for this level. He said presenting was part of my development. I nodded calmly, stirring sugar into my coffee. Congratulations on the promotion, Megan. But inside, something cold settled in my chest. I quietly vowed that day Jared would never blindside me again. Never. From that moment, I started paying attention differently. The humiliations came like drops of water wearing away stone. Small things that added up to something devastating. During team meetings, Jared would interrupt me mid-sentence. Let me clarify what Avery's trying to say, he'd announce, then repeat my exact words as if I'd been unclear. Colleagues would nod at his insight. He called me the safety net in front of clients, making it sound like I was there to clean up messes rather than prevent them. Don't worry, he'd say with a chuckle. Avery will make sure nothing falls through the cracks. My best accounts got quietly reassigned. We need someone with more strategic thinking on the Patterson file, he'd explain. Then he'd give those accounts to newer employees I'd trained. Mistakes that weren't mine became my fault. System glitches became my oversight. Late deliveries caused by his poor planning became my scheduling errors. Each incident was small enough to seem petty if I complained. But together they painted a picture of someone incompetent, someone holding the team back. I thought if I worked harder, he'd stop. But then I found out something that changed everything about how I saw this game. I discovered the truth by accident. I'd stayed late to finish a cost analysis report, and Jared had left his computer unlocked. As I walked past his office, I glimpsed a spreadsheet on his screen. My own project data, but the numbers were wrong. I looked closer. He'd manipulated the shipment costs to make his quarterly performance look better. Where I'd saved the company money through efficiency, he'd inflated the savings. Where delays had cost us, he'd blamed system errors and marked them as unavoidable. My stomach dropped. For months, I'd been confused by discrepancies between my reports and what management saw. Now I understood. Jared wasn't just taking credit for my work. He was actively sabotaging my reputation to boost his own. I took photos with my phone, my hands shaking slightly. Here was proof that every mistake blamed on me had actually been his manipulation. I stared at the evidence, something new growing inside me. Not anger exactly, but something colder, more calculating. I whispered to myself, if he can play the long game, so can I. That night, I started my own game plan. I became a different person. Not obviously different. I still smiled politely, still worked diligently, but now everything had purpose. I started documenting everything. Every email, every meeting, every decision. I kept detailed timestamps and saved copies of all my work to personal drives. When Jared gave contradictory instructions, I followed up with confirmation emails, just to make sure I understand correctly, I'd write. I also began quietly redesigning our back-end systems. Small improvements that made processes run smoother, but only if maintained correctly. I built these systems to be efficient but delicate, requiring specific knowledge to keep running properly. I automated reports that I used to do manually, but I didn't share the automation codes with anyone. I created shortcuts and workflows that saved hours of work, but I kept the methods to myself. To anyone watching, I was just doing my job better. But I was actually creating dependencies. The systems ran beautifully under my care, making Jared look good. But without proper maintenance, they'd develop problems quickly. And the only person who really understood how to keep everything from falling apart was me. I made a crucial mistake. I trusted someone. Jill had been my work friend for 2 years. We grabbed lunch together, complained about meetings, shared weekend stories. When my frustration with Jared reached a boiling point, I confided in her. He's impossible, I told her over coffee. He takes credit for everything I do, then blames me when his own mistakes cause problems. I feel like I'm going crazy. Jill nodded sympathetically. That's awful, Avery. You should document everything. Maybe talk to HR? I felt better having someone understand. For weeks, she'd ask how things were going, and I'd share my latest frustrations. She seemed genuinely supportive. Then came my annual performance review. Jared sat across from me, reading from notes. Several colleagues have expressed concerns about your attitude lately. Complaints about management, negative comments about company direction, general pessimism affecting team morale. He used my exact words, phrases I'd only shared with Jill. After the meeting, I found Jill by the elevator. She couldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, she mumbled. He asked if I'd noticed any changes in your behavior. I thought he was trying to help. I deleted her contact from my phone that night. Fine, I'd work alone. I shifted my focus to the people who actually mattered, our clients. I started building genuine relationships, not in a manipulative way, but through simple reliability. When clients called with problems, I answered immediately. When they needed rush orders, I found solutions. When they had questions about their accounts, I gave them straight answers instead of corporate speak. I remembered their preferences. Mrs. Patterson liked email updates every Tuesday. Mr. Hamilton preferred phone calls in the afternoon. The Johnson account team appreciated detailed reports with visual charts. Soon, clients started requesting me directly. Is Avery available? They'd ask the main line. She always knows exactly what's happening with our orders. Jared noticed, but couldn't complain. Client satisfaction was up, and he was getting credit for my relationships. What he didn't realize was that these clients were developing loyalty to me personally, not to the company. During one particularly complex delivery issue, a long-term client named Mr. Torres called me directly. After I solved his problem in 20 minutes, he said quietly, Avery, if you ever leave that place, call me first. I'd love to work with you wherever you land. I smiled, filing that comment away. Thank you, Mr. Torres. I'll remember that. I'd been quietly job hunting for months, carefully researching companies and preparing for interviews. When Sterling Logistics, a rising competitor, offered me a senior operations manager position, I nearly cried with relief. The salary was 40% higher than what I was making. The benefits were better. Most importantly, I'd have real authority and a team that would actually report to me. But I didn't resign immediately. I wanted to time my departure perfectly. I signed the contract on a Tuesday, setting my start date for 6 weeks out. That gave me time to finish current projects and, more importantly, to let Jared himself into a deeper hole. I set up my personal countdown calendar. 6 weeks to let him take complete ownership of systems he didn't understand. 6 weeks to let him promise clients results he couldn't deliver without me. 6 weeks for him to become completely dependent on my knowledge while simultaneously making my position impossible. I smiled as I scheduled my resignation letter to send automatically on the perfect date. Everything was falling into place. Jared was practically glowing when he announced the Hammond Industries contract. It was our biggest potential client, worth more than $2 million annually. He'd spent months courting them, promising revolutionary efficiency improvements. In the team meeting, he outlined his strategy. Every single innovation he described was based on systems I'd built. The automated routing, the predictive analytics, the real-time tracking, all my designs. After the meeting, he cornered me privately. "Larson, this deal is going to make me untouchable around here. Don't screw it up." He pointed his finger at me like I was a child. "I mean it. This Hammond contract succeeds, and I'm looking at a VP position within a year." I nodded politely. "I'll make sure everything runs smoothly, Jared." He smiled, satisfied. "Good. I knew I could count on you." What he didn't know was that I'd already given my 2 weeks' notice to HR, effective the day before the Hammond contract implementation began. What he also didn't know was that the systems he was promising Hammond required constant fine-tuning that only I knew how to do. I was already mentally moved on. He was about to own something he couldn't maintain. I stopped being Jared's safety net. Not dramatically, not obviously. I just started doing exactly what my job description required, nothing more. When his reports had small errors, I didn't quietly fix them anymore. When his scheduling created conflicts, I followed his instructions precisely instead of making adjustments. When clients called with urgent requests that needed creative solutions, I followed standard protocol instead of working miracles. The first cracks appeared within days. A shipment got delayed because Jared had scheduled 2 deliveries for the same truck. In the past, I would have caught this and rearranged things quietly. This time, I let the schedule stand exactly as he'd written it. When the client called angry about the delay, I calmly explained that I'd followed the scheduling instructions exactly as provided by management. Jared stormed over to my desk. "Why are these delays happening? These are basic logistics." I shrugged, looking up from my computer. "I'm following the procedures you outlined in your memo last month." His face reddened, but he couldn't argue. He'd specifically told me to stop taking initiative and follow his directions precisely. He had no idea how much initiative I'd been taking to keep him looking competent. The meeting that changed everything started like any other Tuesday morning. Jared had gathered the team to discuss the Hammond contract launch, which was happening in 2 weeks. "There's been a shipment error," he announced, his voice tight with frustration. "Someone miscalculated the delivery windows for the test run, and now Hammond is questioning our reliability." All eyes turned to me. I felt my chest tighten with familiar dread. Here it came. Another public humiliation for something that wasn't my fault. "Avery," Jared said, his tone sharp. "Walk us through your calculations." I pulled up my report on the shared screen. "I used the delivery data you provided yesterday. The shipment times are exactly what you specified in this email." I highlighted the relevant numbers. The room went quiet. Jared's face went pale, then red. The data clearly showed his error, not mine. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't let it slide. The mistake was in the original timeframe estimates. I flagged this as a potential issue in my preliminary report last week. Jared's smirk appeared, cold and deadly. "If you can't handle constructive criticism, maybe this role isn't for you anymore." My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. "I can handle criticism when it's accurate." Within an hour, I was in HR signing termination papers. "Performance issues and attitude problems," they cited. Jared had moved fast, painting me as insubordinate and unreliable. I packed my personal items while coworkers whispered behind their hands. Some looked sympathetic. Others seemed relieved they weren't in my shoes. Jared watched from his office doorway, arms crossed, looking satisfied with his quick victory. As I carried my box toward the elevator, I passed his desk. He was already on the phone with Hammond Industries, probably doing damage control. I paused beside him and said quietly, "Good luck with the Hammond account." He covered the phone's mouthpiece and frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled, the same knowing smile from earlier that morning. "Nothing at all. I'm sure you'll handle it perfectly." The elevator doors closed on his confused expression. In my car, I called Sterling Logistics and moved up my start date. "Actually, I'm available immediately." Then I sent a text to 3 of my most loyal clients. "I've moved to Sterling Logistics. Looking forward to continuing our partnership." By the time I got home, 2 of them had already called me back. The first domino fell exactly as I'd predicted. Without me there to quietly fix his errors and maintain the delicate systems, Jared's world started cracking. The Hammond account began experiencing delays within days. The automated routing system developed glitches that required specific troubleshooting knowledge. Reports that used to generate flawlessly started producing errors. Jared spent his first week frantically trying to figure out what was going wrong. He called the IT department repeatedly, but they couldn't solve problems with systems I'd customized beyond their standard protocols. The real crisis hit when Hammond Industries called to complain about inconsistent tracking data. The information they were receiving didn't match their actual shipments, making it impossible for them to coordinate with their own clients. According to my former coworker Xander, who texted me updates, Jared was losing his mind. He'd been working 16-hour days, trying to manually fix problems that my automated systems used to handle seamlessly. On Friday afternoon, Jared finally swallowed his pride. My phone rang with a number I recognized. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "I'm sorry, who is this?" I asked politely. His voice was strained. "Cut the act, Avery. I need you to walk me through some of these system configurations." I let him squirm for a moment before responding. "Jared, I appreciate you calling, but I'm quite busy at my new position." "Look," he said, his voice shifting to fake friendliness, "I know things ended badly, but we're professionals, right? I just need a little help with some technical details, nothing major." I could hear the desperation he was trying to hide. In the background, phones were ringing constantly, probably angry clients. "I'd love to help," I said sweetly, "but Sterling Logistics keeps me pretty occupied. We're actually bringing on several new accounts this week. Exciting times." "I could pay you," he said quickly. "Consulting fees. Just a few hours to help sort out these glitches." The silence stretched between us. I let him listen to his own breathing while I decided how to respond. "Jared," I said finally, "remember all those times you told me to take ownership of my mistakes? This seems like a great opportunity for you to practice what you preach." I hung up and immediately blocked his number. Then I called my new boss to discuss expanding our client services department. We were going to need more capacity soon. Mr. Torres was my first major win at Sterling Logistics. He'd been growing frustrated with Innovis's service delays and called me within days of my arrival. "Avery, I heard you moved. Are you taking on new contracts?" His voice was hopeful. "I'd love to help, Mr. Torres. Let me connect you with our sales team." Within a week, Torres Industries had signed with Sterling Logistics, specifically requesting me as their account manager. The contract was worth $800,000 annually, a significant loss for Innovis. Then Mrs. Patterson called. "I've been dealing with nothing but problems since you left," she explained. "Every request takes twice as long, and nobody seems to understand our needs." Another smooth transfer to Sterling. Another major contract moved. By the end of my second week, I'd facilitated the transfer of 4 major accounts, not through any unethical means. These clients were genuinely dissatisfied with Innovix's declining service and had reached out to me directly. My new manager was thrilled. "Avery, you're exceeding every expectation. The board is already asking about fast-tracking your promotion." Meanwhile, my former colleague Xander texted me regularly with updates from Innovix. The gossip was that Jared was in full panic mode, working nights and weekends, making increasingly desperate calls to try to retain clients. By week 3 of my departure, Innovix's upper management was starting to ask questions. Xander reported that the monthly performance review meeting had been tense. "Why are we losing so many established accounts?" the VP had asked. "These were stable relationships for years." Jared had tried to blame market competition and economic factors, but someone brought up the elephant in the room. Didn't Avery warn about service delivery issues in her quarterly reports? I remember her flagging potential client retention problems. That question led to more questions. Suddenly, people were digging through old meeting notes and email chains. They were finding a paper trail of my warnings, suggestions, and solutions, all documented, all time-stamped, all ignored or dismissed by Jared. The picture that emerged wasn't flattering for him. While I'd been consistently identifying problems and proposing fixes, he'd been dismissing my concerns and taking credit for successes. Xander forwarded me a company-wide email from the operations director. "We're conducting a comprehensive review of recent account losses and operational inefficiencies. All department heads should prepare detailed reports on their team's performance over the past year." Jared had to know this audit would expose his poor management, which probably explained his increasingly frantic attempts to fix problems he didn't understand. The internal audit was thorough and devastating. Every report I'd ever submitted was reviewed. Every prediction I'd made was analyzed. Every warning I'd given was documented. The pattern was undeniable. I had consistently identified operational risks and proposed solutions. Jared had consistently ignored my input while taking credit for successful outcomes. The auditors found my detailed documentation of the system improvements I'd implemented, complete with efficiency gains and cost savings. They also found Jared's manipulated reports that had inflated his performance metrics. Most damaging was the timeline analysis. It showed clearly that problems began escalating immediately after my departure, precisely in the areas I'd warned needed attention. Xander sent me a screenshot of the audit summary. Employee A demonstrated exceptional foresight and operational expertise. Management's failure to utilize this expertise and subsequent termination of Employee A directly contributed to current service failures and client losses. Employee A was me. Though they'd anonymized the report, the board scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss leadership effectiveness in the operations department. Jared apparently stormed into HR that afternoon, shouting about how I'd set him up and demanding they investigate me for corporate sabotage. But the audit had made clear that everything I'd done was not only legitimate, but had actually been trying to prevent exactly the crisis he was now facing. Jared's second call came a month after I'd blocked his original number. He was using the company's main line, probably hoping I wouldn't recognize it. "Avery, please don't hang up," he said quickly when I answered. "I need help, real help." His voice was different now, smaller, more desperate. The swagger was completely gone. "I'll pay you whatever you want," he continued. "Consultant rates, contractor fees, whatever. Just help me fix these systems. The Hammond deal is falling apart and I can't figure out what's wrong." I let the silence stretch while I considered my response. In the background, I could hear the chaos of his office. Phones ringing unanswered, urgent conversations, the sound of panic. "Jared," I said calmly, "do you remember what you told me in my performance review? That I needed to take ownership of my mistakes?" "This is different," he said quickly. "These aren't mistakes, they're system failures. Technical issues that only you know how to." "I warned you about these exact issues," I interrupted. "Multiple times, in writing, you told me I was being negative and resistant to change." "I know, but you didn't listen then. Why should I help you now?" I hung up and went back to reviewing proposals for Sterling's expansion into new markets. The exodus from Innovix accelerated in month 2. The Hammond Industries contract was officially canceled, citing repeated service failures and unreliable delivery tracking. 2 other major clients followed within days. Word spread quickly through the industry. Innovix Logistics was struggling with operational problems and losing key accounts. Meanwhile, Sterling Logistics was gaining a reputation for exceptional service and client retention. My former colleagues were jumping ship. Xander gave his notice, citing lack of confidence in current leadership. 3 other experienced employees followed within the same week. Industry publications began running articles about Innovix's troubles. Once stable logistics company faces client exodus, read one headline. Another asked, what happened to Innovix's operational excellence? The articles didn't mention me specifically, but industry insiders knew the timeline. They could connect the dots between my departure and Innovix's sudden decline. Jared's golden boy reputation was crumbling. The same management team that had once praised his innovative leadership was now questioning his basic competence. The board meetings were becoming more frequent and more contentious. My LinkedIn profile was exploding with connection requests from Innovix's competitors, all hoping to poach their remaining clients or hire their displaced employees. The board's decision was swift and brutal. After 6 weeks of declining performance and mounting losses, they removed Jared from his management position. He wasn't fired. That would have created legal complications and potential severance issues. Instead, he was reassigned to a role that better utilizes his core competencies. Corporate speak for demotion. His new position was individual contributor, reporting to the same manager who had once reported to him. No team, no authority, no visibility to upper management. He'd gone from rising star to cautionary tale in less than 2 months. Xander, who was still finishing out his notice period, described the aftermath. You should have seen his face when they announced the reorganization. He just sat there, staring at his hands, while everyone else in the meeting avoided eye contact. The humiliation was public and complete. The same colleagues who had once laughed at his jokes about my attitude problems were now whispering about his failed leadership and poor decision-making. I found myself checking his LinkedIn profile occasionally. His title had changed from operations manager to simply operations analyst. His activity had dropped to almost nothing. No more proud posts about team achievements or industry insights. Word of Jared's fall from grace spread through the logistics industry faster than I'd expected. When Sage Logistics, one of Innovix's competitors, reached out to him about a management position, they'd already heard the rumors. We're looking for someone with operations experience, the recruiter had told him. But we need someone who can demonstrate strong leadership and team-building capabilities. Jared couldn't provide references from his recent management experience. His former team members had either left Innovix or, in exit interviews, had cited his leadership as a factor in their departure. The recruitment process stalled quickly. No one wanted to hire a manager with a reputation for driving away talent and losing major accounts. According to Xander, Jared had grown increasingly bitter and isolated at Innovix. He'd started making comments about how I'd manipulated the situation and set him up to fail. But these complaints only made him look worse, like someone who couldn't take responsibility for his own decisions. He'd created a narrative where he was the victim of my scheming rather than the author of his own downfall. But the documented evidence made that story impossible for anyone else to believe. Late one night, Xander texted me a screenshot of Jared sitting alone in the break room, muttering to himself, "She ruined me." While Jared's career was imploding, mine was flourishing. Sterling Logistics had promoted me to VP of Operations within 6 months of my arrival, a position that had taken me 3 years to even be considered for at Innovix. The promotion came with a significant salary increase, a larger team, and real authority to implement the kinds of systematic improvements I'd been proposing for years. More importantly, it came with respect and recognition for my expertise. My former clients weren't just staying with Sterling, they were expanding their contracts and referring new business. Mrs. Patterson had introduced us to 3 new accounts in her industry. Mr. Torres was planning a major logistics expansion and wanted Sterling to handle the entire project. The local business journal ran a feature article about Sterling's rapid growth, highlighting our client retention rates and operational efficiency. The article quoted several clients praising the company's exceptional attention to detail and proactive problem-solving approach. While they didn't mention me by name, I recognized my own methods and philosophies in their descriptions. Finally, my approach to logistics was being valued and implemented properly. I'd been invited to speak at the Regional Logistics Conference, the same conference where Jared had presented my ideas as his own just 2 years earlier. This time, I'd be presenting my own innovations under my own name. The Regional Logistics Conference was held at the downtown Marriott, the same venue where I'd watched Jared present my work 2 years earlier. This time, I was the featured speaker. As I arrived for the networking session before my presentation, I spotted a familiar figure near the registration table. Jared was there, looking tired and older than his years. He was wearing a rumpled suit and had the defeated posture of someone who'd lost his confidence. Our eyes met across the crowded lobby. For a moment, we both froze. Then he approached me, his smile forced but attempting friendliness. "Avery, good to see you," he said, extending his hand. "No hard feelings about how things ended, right? We're all just trying to do our jobs." I shook his hand politely. "Hello, Jared." He glanced at my conference badge, which displayed my new title. VP of Operations. Impressive. Sterling's doing well, I hear. "We are," I replied simply. An awkward silence fell between us. He seemed to be searching for something to say that might bridge the gap between where we'd been and where we were now. "Listen," he said finally, "I hope you know I always respected your technical skills. If I could do things differently..." I smiled politely. "I told you the cracks were showing, Jared. You just didn't want to listen." 6 months later, I was sitting in my corner office at Sterling Logistics, reading the industry newsletter over my morning coffee. The headline caught my attention. Sterling Logistics wins major Hammond Industries contract. The same contract that had been Jared's golden ticket was now mine. Hammond had approached Sterling directly, specifically requesting me as their account manager. They'd heard about our reputation for operational excellence and wanted to work with a company that valued expertise over politics. The irony wasn't lost on me. The deal that was supposed to make Jared untouchable had instead become the foundation of my success at Sterling. The systems he'd promised Hammond were now fully implemented and running flawlessly under my direction. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the city skyline. Innovis Logistics was still operating, but their reputation never fully recovered. They'd become a cautionary tale about the importance of recognizing and retaining talent. Jared was still there, in his diminished role, probably wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. But I knew the truth. I didn't need to destroy him. He'd done that all by himself, one bad decision at a time. The best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't plotting someone's downfall. It was simply being prepared when they handed you the tools to succeed without them.